And a pleasant good afternoon to everyone out there in Irish Breakdown land. I am Vince D'Addario. That is Brian Driscoll, and we are back. And it is Tuesday, and we are going to talk about offensive newcomers, right? So offensive newcomers, Brian. Offensive newcomers could be freshmen, because clearly they're newcoming. They could be transfer students. They could potentially be people that have never seen the field and who will see the field. So kind of a broad brush. And in full disclosure, we were going to do a newcomer show and we were going to do a freshman show. But we looked at the calendar and we're like,
running out of days.
We're running out of days. So we kind of combined it all, and it's just offensive newcomers, and it covers everybody. So we put our heads together. We came up with a list, and I think it's a pretty good list. So we're going to kind of run through it. See what everybody thinks. And then, of course, we will get to your questions and comments and all that fun stuff. So really looking forward to today's show, Brian.
Yeah, no question. And, we thought about adding redshirt freshmen in there, but we're going to have a sophomore show coming up here soon, sort of like sophomore surge kind of guy. Sophomores that we expect to kind of break out that we haven't already talked a lot about. So, and look, the interesting thing with this group of newcomers is there's not necessarily a lot of spots open where there aren't returners, meaning whether they're returners that are starters or returners or guys that were in the two deep, so these freshmen, these transfers, they're going to make an impact. They have to beat people out. And,
sure.
And that's the thing where maybe part of the reason why I'm a little bit more optimistic about this offense than maybe I should be. I had a friend of mine the other day that was telling me, hey, I think you're being too optimistic about the offense. And new quarterback, new O-line, receivers. And I'm like, yeah, I see it a little bit differently. And maybe it's just me trying to turn over a new optimistic leaf or something. But I just think that there's a lot more talent that's returning. But I also have a lot of confidence in the the incoming freshman offensive class. It is really good. Mm-hmm. It's really talented. And I think it's going to provide maybe a little bit more impact than we've seen in recent years. Maybe that's wishful thinking. Probably is wishful thinking, but that's where I'm coming from on this topic.
No, I hear you, and I have had very similar conversations with people as well about I'll say it, enthusiasm about what this offense could be, and I've read in a couple of those preseason magazines and things of that nature. People are very hesitant to get excited about this offense, and that is where a lot of question marks arise for a lot of people is with the offense. And when you say there's 4 out of 5 offensive linemen that are going to be replaced, when there's a new quarterback, when the top receivers are gone and you got to replace those, like on paper, okay, yeah, they've got a lot to replace, but at the same time, I'm very confident in those replacements and who we think are going to be those replacements. And specifically when you break down the offensive line, I'm going off on a little bit of a tangent here, but when you break down the offensive line, the guys that are now going to be starting have starts under their belts. I mean, it's not like they're just picking these guys up off the scrap heap and throwing them into the game, right? And so I do have confidence in what the offense can become. And on top of that, what we saw in the spring from a philosophical standpoint gets me excited too. So when you plug in some of these newcomers, I think that this offense could be pretty darn good. So let's jump right into this thing, into the deep end, Brian, because the deep end is always the quarterback, in my opinion. Everybody's got an opinion about the quarterback. There is a newcomer in that room. His name is Jack Coan.
There's a couple.
That's a very good point. There is a couple. But the first one we're going to talk about is the transfer Jack Coan from Wisconsin. He is the definition of a newcomer since he has not been with this Notre Dame program. But up to this point, I've been fairly impressed, and I fully intend him to be the starting quarterback on September 5th down in Tallahassee.
Apologies, I'm a little under the weather today, so I'm just having fits of coughing that just kind of come out of nowhere. So I do apologize for that. Look, Vince, when I look at Jack Coan, I was having this conversation with a friend of mine, longtime friend of mine, very smart guy, very savvy, astute football guy as well. He made the comment, he's like, Notre Dame, he's talking about my optimism for the season. He says, Notre Dame has a new starter quarterback. And I said, well, technically he's a new starter because he's never started in Notre Dame. But I kind of think we don't talk enough about the fact that we're talking about a guy that has started almost 20 games in his career.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking about a guy that led a team with mediocre talent outside of the running back, who was a stud, to 10 wins, Rose Bowl, their 3 losses that year, 3 of their 4 losses, 2 to Ohio State, who was a playoff team that took Clemson down to the wire. The other was in the Rose Bowl by a point to Oregon and Justin Herbert, who this past year was the NFL Rookie of the Year. You know, he went on the road, beat a top 10 Minnesota team. And when I say top 10, they were top 10 at the time, and they finished
in the top 10. Yeah, exactly.
You know, and he played phenomenal that game. You know, he's the guy that smacked Michigan 35-14 the same year that Michigan beat Notre Dame, 45-14, right? So, and this is a kid that when you look at his numbers, he completed almost 70% of his passes. Prior to that, the last quarterback to sniff that mark was a guy named Russell Wilson. I'm not sure if you've heard of him. He plays quarterback for the Seahawks. Has got a ringer.
See, you know? It's out there on the West Coast, man. So I don't follow.
So you know, then my response I got yesterday was, well, you know, they didn't score a lot at Wisconsin. I'm like, well, Wisconsin never scores a lot. I'm like, but in 2019 they scored over 34 points a game, which by the way is almost 2 points higher than what Notre Dame scored this past year. And number 2, it was significant. It was almost 10 points higher than what they scored the year after he left in 2020 without him. And it was about 5 or 6 points higher than what it was the year before he took over. The last time they scored more points than what they scored in 2019 with him at quarterback was 2014. So you just look at all the numbers and you're saying that was the best offense at Wisconsin. Now, was he the primary reason? No, Jonathan Taylor was. I mean, we're going to be honest about it. But they had Jonathan Taylor the year before that too. And the point is he provided some ability to throw the football that really made that offense different that year. And they didn't have great weapons at receiver. So you look at what he's done. I just don't understand why there's this lack of excitement about what he can do. And I think part of it is I have a really good friend of mine that I talked over the years, and he has this problem where he watches a kid do something on film and he assumes that's the only thing the kid can do. So he'll watch a kid on high school film and say, well, you know, the kid doesn't really, you know, the offensive line, he's not a really good pass blocker. Well, you don't see him pass block. So how do you know? But he just assumes that the kid can't pass block because that's not what's on his highlights. Or, you know, he doesn't really catch deep balls. Well, that's just the offense he plays in. You don't, you know what I mean? And I feel with Jack Coan, people say, well, you know, you just look at that offense and this is what he was asked to do. And so that's all he can do. Well, no, that's what he was asked to do. That doesn't mean that's all he can do. And talking to sources, one of the biggest surprises that Notre Dame coaches had about Jack Coan, and it fits to this. And so my point is, in defense of fans who maybe aren't excited about Jack Coan, even coaches the people, from what I'm told, even the coaches in Notre Dame were surprised at how strong his arm was. So these are professional people that get paid really well to evaluate talent, including the head coach who
recruited
millions of dollars,
right?
Who also, you know, has we know Kelly's track record. So, you know, Brian Kelly, you look at the quarterbacks he's worked with in recent years, you know. So even Brian Kelly and Tommy Rees and the offensive staff were a little surprised by his arm strength because of what Wisconsin asked him to do and didn't ask him to do. And so, you know, that's part of the reason when I broke down the film, I'm like, you only see like 5 or 6 examples, but you're like, okay, like that's a little something like they should have asked. But then you look at Wisconsin's offense and say, that's just not who they are.
Right.
So that's really where I come from.
Taylor. Yeah. I mean, it was
right.
Just,
right.
Yeah.
That's where I come from in saying that's where a lot of my optimism comes from is. And then there's the final piece of this is, well, he's not mobile. Again, that's more of what they asked him to do at Wisconsin. This is a kid that was committed to Notre Dame in lacrosse. Last I checked, Notre Dame's lacrosse program was pretty flipping good, right?
Yeah.
So this is a kid that had committed to Notre Dame as lacrosse. He's not Ian Book as a runner, but he's not a Jimmy Clausen either, right? And so I don't think that's going to necessarily be an issue too. Now there are parts of his game that need to be cleaned up, Vince, but this is why I'm a big reason why I'm optimistic is this isn't your typical newcomer or first year starter at quarterback that we're used to seeing.
Well, and when you look at his film, I think that what gets me excited, and I've said this in the past, is that he will go through his reads. And the whole point of RPOs and the offense that we believe that they are going to be running is you need to stand there, you need to go through your reads, whether it's a handoff, whether it's a pass, whether if it is a called pass play, he operates from the pocket. He will go through his reads and he will throw it to the open man. Mm-hmm. Okay. And we haven't seen that in a little while. We just haven't. Look, Ian Book was not comfortable in the pocket. Right. That's all I'm going to say because it's true. Okay. Say what you want. He just wasn't comfortable.
Right.
Okay. And so you're not going to see, I don't believe, Jack Coan bailing too early from the pocket. He's going to stand in there. He is going to be, and I hate to use this as an example, but it's an example that everybody has seen. Everybody talks about Tom Brady and how he's a statue in the pocket, but his feet in the pocket are some of the best of all time. Right. In the pocket, right? Now, you don't want him out there running because he looks like an old man running the ball, right?
He looked like an old man running the ball when he was a rookie.
That's what I'm saying. Like when they flash back to his 40-yard dash at the combine, I feel like right now I could beat that time, right? So what I am saying is his feet in the pocket are excellent, stepping up, right. Shuffling to the side, things of that nature. That's what you're going to see from Jack Coan. He's good in the pocket, okay? Again, he's athletic enough where if he has to, he can get some yards for you, outside the pocket if things break down, things of that nature.
He's going to be a guy that on 3rd and 4, you run a read zone, the backside collapses, he pulls and runs it for 6 yards and slides.
Absolutely.
Or it's 3rd and 7 and you drop 8 and the pass rush doesn't keep its, contained lanes and he steps up and runs for 9 yards and slides.
He can do that.
Right. Yeah. And so but what he's not going to give you, the trade-off to all that is he's not going to give you those plays like we saw from Ian Book last year where he would scramble around, find Kyron Williams open down the field. Those kind of things you're not going to have. I think of the touchdown pass that Ian Book made at the end of the game against Clemson where he scrambles to his right, finds Avery Davis backside, makes that throw. I don't know if we're going to see that from Jack Coan. So there is some trade-off. But If I could only pick one, I'm going to pick the guy that can sit in the pocket and pick you apart.
Because he's going to run the offense. And more often than not, that's what you want. Now, I think you will see some moving pocket because we saw a little bit of that.
Bootlegs. When you explain what you mean by moving pocket, Vince.
So like you said, bootleg. So, the offensive line kind of almost shifts to the right, follows the quarterback a little bit, and he gets out.
Or he'll be naked. It'll be naked.
Exactly. Right. And that's from a play action standpoint a lot of times because you play action to the right.
Naked means there's no blockers to protect them.
Exactly. Because all the action's going the other way. And now you've got Jack Coan out there with options, right? With throwing options. So I think
the advantages to that to me are you don't always want the pass rush to know where the quarterback's going to be.
Right. Exactly.
And so by doing some half rolls essentially means it's like a quick line set where essentially the line and the quarterback just move over 4 or 5 steps.
And a half roll means he's pretty much stopping at the top.
Right. He'll set up and throw. Yeah. And then you got to figure out a way to protect the backside because the backside becomes a little loose. And then you'll see, sprint outs. We saw that a little bit this spring. Mm-hmm. We'll see bootlegs, like you mentioned, Vince. We'll see play action stuff where I think they'll move, where they run the outside zone look from the shotgun and then roll them out. And now that's a bootleg that has a blocker. So you have a guard pull out in front, that. Right. And that's when just a bootleg. Then you have a naked is when the quarterback's getting outside and there's no blocker. So that's what naked means in case people were like, why are they talking about
naked?
Nakeds in football. That's a term that essentially means that a quarterback's getting out of the pocket with no protection.
And he's all by himself. Yeah, there's nothing around him.
Right. And so I think we'll see some of that. And I don't know if Ian Book was great that's the thing is Ian Book was great throwing off platform, but he wasn't necessarily great throwing in structured movement,
and that's what
Jack Coan will be a little better than that.
It's a really good term, a structured movement. It is within the offense. It is a planned role. It is all within. It's timing, right? I mean, it's timing because a lot of times you'll have a delayed route potentially by a tight end. You'll have guys coming from the other side of the formation over. A lot of those, and that's all timing, and that takes time to get down. But you're right. It's within the structure of the offense. And I do believe he's athletic enough to do that. I think we'll see a lot of that, frankly. I really do.
And I'll be honest, Vince, when I saw that Notre Dame was first looking at Jack Coan, I was like, oh, gosh. Because in fairness, I saw the same. Because when I watched Jack Coan at Wisconsin, I just watched him on a Saturday before Notre Dame game, just watching the game just as a fan. So I saw him play. I saw him tuck that ball up and run against Michigan against this wide open lane. He can do things like that. If you remember the play I'm talking about, so he had like a 20-yard touchdown run against Michigan where he dropped back. Michigan just bailed, no pass rush contained, and he just took off and ran for 20-plus yards for a touchdown. But I was not thrilled because, you just didn't see Jack Coan making a ton of plays with his arm. It was handed it off to Jonathan Taylor and that kind of thing. It wasn't until after they were looking at him that I went and watched all 22 film. All 22 film means it's like coaching film, so you can see like the whole thing. You can see the reads. You can see what the defense is doing. You can see the timing and all those kind of things. It wasn't until I watched like 4 or 5 of those games that I was like, you know what? This kid's got a lot more than I thought he had. And that's when I started to get excited about it. So in fairness
Yeah.
to the people that I'm saying, yeah, I don't understand why people aren't more excited. I get it.
Yeah.
I do. So I guess I do understand it because I was there initially, because you don't see anything special. Like, you don't watch them and you're like, wow, look at that arm, like you do with other people. But then you really break it down and you look at the decision making and his willingness to throw the ball into tight windows, and he's going to make mistakes. I mean, he threw a pick against Illinois that he forced because he was trying to make a play. He, sometimes he'll hold onto the ball a little bit too long, trying to find somebody open. And instead of just checking it down, and that's resulted, I think I counted like 3 or 4 times he got strip sacked in his 1 year start. You can't have that, right? So those are things that got to get cleaned up, but there's a lot to like about Jack Coan's game, in my opinion. And of course, we have Tyler Buckner, who we won't get into today. We're going to have a whole show about quarterbacks right before fall camp that will dive more into Tyler Buckner and his potential impact this season.
So the bottom line about Jack Coan is, we believe he's going to end up being the starter. I mean, all signs point to that. And so when we're talking about newcomers, he fits the mold. Like, you're going to need Jack Coan to be. He's going to affect the game, I guess is the best way to put it.
Mm-hmm.
He's going to be impactful to this game. So whether he's good or bad, he's going to be impactful. We believe that he's going to be good. He's going to hold on to that starting role all season. Not to say that there isn't a role for the other 2 guys that are in this battle for the starting quarterback position, but I believe, and I don't want to speak for you, Brian, that we believe that, Jack Coan's going to be the starter, and he's going to be a successful starter because he's going to distribute the ball. Yeah. And if the offense is the way we think it's going to be, a lot of guys are going to get touches, and Jack Coan's going to distribute that. You made, God, I can't even remember where we're talking about this or where I heard you say it, because we talk all the time. But you said you see Jack Coan as like a point guard.
I said this on the radio yesterday. Okay. You were listening to it on the radio.
That's right.
And I've used this expression in the past about him, but I've more so used it about Drew Pine. And to use basketball references, because I like using other analogies. It's just more fun that way. But there's different types of point guards, right? Like there's the Derrick Rose point guard, the scorer, right? The Allen Iverson. When they pretended he was a point guard, the guy that's the flashy, the scorer, right? There's the scorer guy. Then there's like Magic Johnson, who, Magic could score if he needed to, but he was flashy. He was a distributor, but he was also a scorer, could rebound. Magic could play all 5 spots, and all those kind of things. And then there's John Stockton, right? Who is never flashy, never appreciated, just kind of does his dirty work and says, hey, man, I'm going to get Karl Malone all the credit. I'm going to get Jeff Hornacek all the credit. I'm going to get these, Byron Russell all the credit. I'm going to get these other guys the credit because I'm just going to get the ball where it needs to get to, right? And that's Jack Coan and Drew Pine to me. They're not flashy, where maybe Tyler Buckner's more like Jason Williams, you know what I mean? He's going to make those real flashy plays.
Right.
That's not Jack Coan. He's just going to get the ball where it needs to get to. But with this team, with Kyron Williams, with Chris Tyree, with the freshman running backs we'll get to, with Michael Mayer, with the deep tight end depth chart, with Kevin Austin, Braden Lindsey, Avery Davis, Lawrence Keys. I just make sure I don't leave anybody out. Xavier Watts, Lorenzo Styles, Deion Colsey, right? I mean, there's a lot of weapons there. And because of the youth that they have, or not youth, because of some of the lack of proven production that those positions have, it's even more imperative that you have a point guard quarterback that says, hey, you just worry about your job. I'll get you the ball if you're open. I'll get you the ball if the read takes me there. You do your job, and I'll get you the football. And I think that's something that this offense needs. I think it's going to be impactful for the receivers. It's going to be impactful for guys. Hey, look, I know I got to do my job because Jack will get me the ball. He's not going to lock in on Michael Mayer all the time. He's not going to lock in on Kyron Williams every single play. He's not going to lock in on so-and-so every play. He's going to read the defense out. He's going to get the ball where it needs to go to. So you better go run your route. And I think that's going to be very good for this offense.
Yep, completely agree with you. So that is Jack Coan. He is the first newcomer that we are talking about today. Let's move to another transfer. And I want to say this one comes with a little bit more, we'll call it intrigue, Brian, from you and I. Kane Madden came over from Marshall. He was a second-team All-American at Marshall. He is, slated to potentially be the starting right guard for this Notre Dame team. They went out and picked him up and brought him in, and we assume that they are. Why would they not bring him in to be a starter? So he's going to have an impact, whether we think it's going to be positive, negative, or in between. He's going to have an impact on this team. Brian, I'll let you kind of start your thoughts on Cain Madden.
Well, I don't think it's going to be a negative impact. I don't think he's going to be a bad football player. I just don't think he's going to be the guy based on film that he's being made out to be, first team All-American, second team All-American, those kind of things. I think that some of the limitations we saw on film were things that did not expose him, that he was not going to expose him at Marshall against a non-Power 5, all, Sun Belt, Conference USA, whatever league that's in schedule. And I hope I'm wrong, but he is big, size-wise. He's not tall, but he's girth-wise.
Yeah, right.
Very powerful, very fundamentally sound. And the thing I liked about him on film, Vince, which is very important for this football team, is he's very assignment correct. And here's why I say that's important. If you have a player that's physically limited, so let's just say he's not athletic enough to run a lot of outside zones, okay? There's things you can do to protect against that. You can maybe do more pin and pull type of stuff. So, hey, look, he's not a guy that's going to reach a 5 technique on an outside zone. He's not a guy that's going to overtake a 3 technique even, so much less a 5 technique. 3 technique meaning his outside shoulder, 5 technique meaning head up to outside of the tackle. So, okay, so you can't really run that. Okay, so here's what you do. You coach it up and you say, we're going to pin and pull this thing. What that means is you're going to have the tackle down block on the 3 technique, and then Cain can get out and move, and he'll be a little bit more effective that way. There's some things you can do with kick out schemes that you can implement, things that Notre Dame has done that they just haven't done a lot, that when you run to his side, you can use those as opposed to the outside zone. So there's things that you can do to protect him. But if he's assignment correct, it adds to that, because hey, look, whatever we're going to call, we know he's going to execute that effectively. We just got to make sure we call things that he can execute.
That he can do, yeah.
And so that's. But if he was a guy that wasn't necessarily assignment correct and he was limited athletically, then that would create some problems. So he does bring some value. Now, if I'm wrong about his athleticism, then he'll be very good. That's the thing. If I'm wrong about his footwork, his foot quickness or lack thereof, his agility or lack thereof, then this is going to be a great pickup. If I am right about that, he is going to be limited. Then it's imperative that Jeff Quinn and Tommy Rees make sure that if he is starting, that they're very smart about what they run and don't run. So, for example, you're not going to necessarily you're going to have to alter how you run inside zone, right? So if you're asking him on the backside of inside zone to really have to work to cut off a guy, or outside zone, that's probably not smart. But you know what he can do? He can be at the front of the inside zone, so you run inside zone to him where you're cutting away from him, where now he's power blocking.
He's taking that 3 technique.
Right. Or if some teams like to run to the 1 technique and then cut back to the 3 technique. It just depends on what you like to do. And then there may be some weeks where the looks that they show, you do want to run him back because he can get real good movement. Because here's the thing about Cain Madden. If he gets his hands on you,
done,
and he gets his shoulders on you, he's going to move you now.
I agree with that, yes.
Because he's a big, strong kid. And so those are the things that he brings to the table. So now it comes down to, as a coaching staff, you have to know his limitations, and you have to coach around those, and then coach in a way that accents his strengths. So that's going to be the thing. So when I talk about Cain Madden, and I've been probably more negative than I should have been, meaning I didn't balance that negativity out with the good things that we saw from him. That's on me, but that's my concern, because they're making him out to be something that I just don't see on film.
Yeah.
But good coaching can still utilize a kid like that. Good coaches can utilize a kid like Cain Madden because of those attributes that he does possess. It's just now you have maybe it limits you to where you're not going to run as much pure outside zone as you otherwise would have. So, or maybe you have to change your outside zone to certain looks, where you're going to run outside zone away from him to a 1 technique, because now it's easier for him to have cutoff if he's blocking a 3 technique or up to the linebacker kind of thing. So those are the different things that you have to look at. But if they can utilize his size and strength, Vince, that's certainly going to help this group. And I will say one more thing. I have we got a link to the message board down there, but I have some nuggets, some team nuggets. And this is the kind of stuff that I don't put out a whole lot that I am going to start putting on the message board, because it needs to be, it just needs to be in a place where it's a little bit more secure. But I have some nuggets of what I'm hearing about the offensive line. And one thing I have been told is that, yes, they do expect Cain Madden to start, because that's why they recruited him, but he's not being handed the starting job, is what I'm told. That he is going to have to battle for that job. And there's some young linemen that are having really good off seasons, and some realignment of where some things are going to be. And And one thing I will say publicly is I am hearing more and more and more that Jared Patterson is going to be at center, back to center. And so we can get into the ramifications of that. And Vince, you shake your head, and that was my initial reaction. But when I found out what they're doing at the position, it's going to make a lot more sense. And you can see that, you can check that out on the message board. So there are some things that I really like from that, Vince, and some aspects of this move that I really like. And before we kind of finish, Truman, I appreciate Truman DeMel with the super sticker, super chat. I appreciate that very, very much, Truman. Man. That's excellent. Excellent. Really appreciate that. But Vince, that's kind of where I'm seeing he's going to have to win that job, and I don't think it's necessarily a given that it's going to be at right guard, although I hope that that's ultimately what they do, just because I'm a believer in what he can do at that position. So don't teach him to play left-handed if he's been playing right-handed so much.
Yeah, no, I agree. And look, there's a lot of pluses about bringing in Cain Madden. I mean, he's got a lot of experience. Obviously, I would assume that he's got the ability to be a leader in that room, but he doesn't necessarily need to be a leader in that room, because you've got Jarrett Patterson there already. You've got Josh Lugg there already. You've got some guys that
Zeke Krell started at center. Just go play your game.
Right. You got it.
Go play your game.
Yep. And that's so there are some pluses. And like you said, he's strong. There's no question. And I used this term when we were talking about him coming over in the first place, is sphere of influence. If you get inside his phone booth, you're not getting out like that. Yeah. He will move you. There's no question.
He's that heavyweight fighter you want to dance around.
Yes,
exactly. If you get in his uppercut range, you're going down, and that's kind of the equivalent.
And my worries are in space. Obviously, getting up to an athletic linebacker, for example, at the next level, if they ask him to get outside. So, for example, we had a play when I was offensive coordinator. Our two guards were both wrestlers, so they had really, really good feet. And we had a sweep play out of two backs, out of split backs, where we took both of our guards and we pulled them out in front of that sweep. That's not something that you're going to be asking Cain Madden to do.
Unless it's going to involve a kick out.
Correct.
That's
correct.
The thing.
But he's not going to be out there leading the way down the sideline for a running back, right? Because that's just not – you're not going to put him in a position to do, and ask him to do something that he can't do. So that's the kind of stuff that worries me. But again,
that's okay. That's not something they asked Aaron Banks to do a ton of either.
Right. Exactly. That's exactly right.
And now, look, Aaron Banks to me is a better athlete than Cain Madden for sure. I'm just making the point that they weren't asking Tommy Kramer to do that ton. And look, I don't think the difference in athleticism between Tommy Kramer and Cain Madden is enormous. But that's also part of the reason Tommy Kramer was more up and down than a lot of the other linemen, because he did have some issues in some of those games against more athletic linemen where he had some props. But let's say this, Vince, when we talk about impact, this is a situation where they need to be right and we need to be wrong.
No question.
And if that is the case, and what I mean by that, not that he's not even have to be a first-team All-American, but if he's just a good, even if it's just an all-conference type of player, a second-team All-ACC caliber of player, that's huge for this offensive line. Because now it's solidified. You have Jarrett Patterson's an All-American at center, in my opinion. Josh Lugg's an experienced guy at right tackle. You have Cain Madden solidifying a guard spot. And then you go in the other guard. Now you know who your left tackle is going to be. Even though he's young, you know who it's going to be. So there's at least some consistency there.
Right.
Now you've got some other guys battling for the other guard spot if Cain Madden wins the other one. And you say, well, you know what? There's a chance you could have 4 guys in the starting lineup that have started games in college. It helps see some of those things.
Sure. And that goes back to why I talked about the fact that the offensive line, yes, they're replacing 4 out of 5 starters, but there's talent there and there's experience there if it's done the way we think and / hope that it is going to be done. So people can rest a little bit easier, I would say, on the offensive line when we talk about that. But, I don't know. It's going to be interesting. There's a lot of questions that still need to be answered, specifically to Cain Madden and then overall to the offensive line. But as the days get closer to fall camp, I feel a little bit better about the offensive line moving forward. It's just, again, a lot of questions to be answered.
I don't feel a lot better about it, Vince, but here's my point. I look at 2018 and I say, is the line going to be worse than that group was? When you look at they lost Mike McGlinchey and Quentin Nelson. Then Alex Bars goes down in game 5. At one point in time, Tommy Kramer was playing so poorly that you benched him for Trevor Ruland, right? You had 2 first-year starters or first-year players, a redshirt freshman and a true freshman at right tackle. Liam Eichenberg was a first-year starter at left tackle. So it's similar to what we have now. Josh Lugg has a whole lot more experience than any of the tackles they had in 2018, right? No, I'm sorry. You had I'm confusing 27. You had a true sophomore and a redshirt sophomore at right guard and right tackle who played as together in 2017. So they had some experience, but it wasn't a ton. I mean, Tommy Kramer had 9 starts. Robert Hainsey had 4. Neither of them were even though they both played a lot, they were neither full-time starters.
Timeshare, yeah.
Sam Mustipher took a big step back from 2017 to 2018 because I think he had to worry so much about others around him. I think that hurt his game. And Liam Eichenberg was inconsistent in his career. I mean, when Alex Bars went down, that was your only stud on the offensive line. What did Notre Dame do in 2018? They went undefeated. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, that was still a really good football team. So to me, it's just the reason I'm still concerned about the line, but the concern is more of what it should be to the expectation of what Notre Dame is supposed to be about. Even if it doesn't play well and it plays like 2018, that was still a top 25 national offensive line. Even though it wasn't top 10 like it's supposed to be, still top 25. They're still going to have a top 25 line this year, even if Cade Madden is exactly what I think he is. They're still going to have a top 25 offensive line. And when you have the talent at quarterback, receiver, tight end, running back, I would argue that we need to see guys step up at receiver. I don't know if there's a Miles Boykin or Chase Claypool, but when you look at the overall talent of the offense and compare it to what it is now, I'll take this 28 group of skill players over the 2018 group of skill players top to bottom, because that year it was really just 3 receivers is all you really had. You had Miles Boykin, Chase Claypool, Chris Fink. You had Alize Mack at tight end. Cole Kmet played a little, but not a ton. Brock Wright didn't even play 100 snaps that year. You had good running back situation. You had Jafar Armstrong, who just just moved over from receiver. You had Tony Jones Jr. Dexter Williams missed the first 4 games of the year. I mean, Dexter Williams is a good player. I don't know if I'd say he's better than Kyron Williams. So there was, and who knew what Miles Boykin was going to be going into that year? I mean, nobody knew what he was going to be. Chris Fink was an okay player, a rotation guy, really, is all he was. Miles Boykin had 13 career catches, and like a quarter of them came in the LSU game. We didn't really know what he was going to be. Guys step up. That's the deal. You lost a 1,400-yard rush of the year before. You lost 2 first-team All-American offensive linemen, and you went out the next year, and your football team was even. So that's where I come from. We say, well, why I'm not as concerned about the offensive line being the reason they're going to go 8-4. That's the thing. Is like, oh, the offensive line struggle. They're going to go 8-4. Based on what? Right? Because when they went on 8-4 or 4-8 in the past, it wasn't because of the offensive line. If Notre Dame goes 8-4 this year, it won't be because of the offensive line. It'll be a combination of factors, including the offensive line. But if all the other positions are as good as I think they're going to be in the offensive line struggles, Notre Dame's still going to be at least a 10-2 football team. It may cost them a game or 2, but they're not going to go 8-4 because of it. And so that's where I come from. But at the end of the day, this puts a lot of pressure on Tommy Rees. Vince, he's got to put together an offense that protects the weaknesses of the offensive line and accents the strengths of the offensive line.
Yes, no question. And and look, let's be honest. That's where one of my biggest question marks lies is the offensive staff going to adjust to the personnel that they have, whether that's, the offensive philosophy, getting the ball out to the wide receivers, in short passes and RPOs and things, but it's also what's the running game going to look like if you have a limited guy at right guard. I mean, that's all part of being a good coach and calling plays that are going to benefit your guys as opposed to calling plays because you think it's a good play on paper.
And I'll say this, I didn't like what they did last year on offense. Didn't like it at all in a lot of different ways. But one thing I will say about it, they did a good job of building around what they perceive their strengths to be.
Sure.
They perceive their strengths to be offensive line, tight ends, and running backs. And so they built an offense around that. And it was an offense that was good enough for them to get to the ACC title game, the college football playoff. Now we need to see if they can build it around a system that's more geared towards skill players. We'll have to see. But they did, I mean, like it or not, they did build around what they perceived their strengths to be last year. And after Kevin Austin and Braden Lindsey got hurt, it became even more necessary to double down on that. Again, there are still things they could and should have done differently, but based on what their philosophy is of not playing freshmen and that kind of receiver, or being hesitant to play freshman receiver, I understand it. I don't like it, but at least I can see it, and I can understand what they did and why they did it. Now we got to hope that they can apply that to this year's team. And if they do, look, this is ultimately where my confidence comes from, Vince, is I do have confidence that Tommy Rees, and look, I have issues with with what Lance Taylor is doing as a recruiter right now. I don't have questions about Lance Taylor's coach. I think Lance Taylor's a very good football coach. I think John McNulty's a very good football coach. And as I've said a million times about Jeff Quinn, I don't think he's a guy that my issue was never that he's a bad coach. It's just that he's not good enough to build an elite offensive line without some circumstances working in his favor. But he's still at least a good coach, right? And even me, who's probably his harshest critic, I think he's at least a good coach. So I'm actually a little bit more confident in the staff from a coaching standpoint. I think the recruiting needs work, Vince. But from a coaching standpoint, I think this is a good group. The question is, will it be good enough to go from 10-2 to – that's why I say the floor is 10-2. I think this staff, based on what we've seen them do, is good enough to go 10-2. The question is are they going to be able to make the changes and push the right buttons in a way that allows them to take that next step? And look, we talk about newcomers. We're getting a little bit sidetracked. We talk about newcomers.
Right.
Jack Coan and Kane Madden are key pieces to that, because now you have two very experienced players at two very important positions, replacing two very experienced players, Ian Book and then Tommy Kramer. Or if you want to go to the other side, Aaron Banks, depending on where he plays. I assume right guard. So, yeah.
All right. Well, Brian, we're talking about offensive line, and there's another newcomer, at least that we are aware of, that is going to be starting on the offensive line. And we're kind of going from one end of the spectrum to the other end of the spectrum when we talk about newcomers, and because we're talking about an incoming freshman starting at arguably the most important offensive line position on the line, and that would be left tackle. And
I would definitely say, I would not say most important. As a quarterback, I'm a big believer that there's no more important position than center.
Fair enough.
But certainly the most
recognizable
and prime position. It's a prime position.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
The most recognizable offensive line position. No question. Which actually adds to what you're talking about, Vince, because it's a spotlight. It's the only spotlight position on the offensive line.
Yes. And if you don't tell me anything about the freshman that is going to be starting there, and you tell me that there's going to be a freshman starting at left tackle, that's going to give me pause. Yeah. And it gave me pause when we first started hearing that was going to be the situation.
If you'd have told me 4 months ago, look, Blake Taylor is my number one ranked recruit in the 2021 recruiting class.
Correct.
I graded him as a top 50 recruit, 5-star upside. I think very highly of Blake Fisher. And even then, when I first was told he was going to start as a true freshman left tackle, I thought, oh, that's not good. Just because, like you said, left tackle, as a former quarterback, the last thing I wanted to see was a rookie playing on my blind side. But then the more and more I talk to sources I trust, Ryan Harris talked about it when he and I sat down for an interview talking about Blake Fisher. Every person that I've talked to that was at practices this spring, we saw it in the blue gold game. Everybody says, yeah, he's not a freshman. He's not your typical freshman. He's a different cat. And so it gave me a little bit more reason for optimism that we saw it. And the other part too, Vince, is he didn't just do it from the standpoint of trying to think the right way to say this. A lot of times with freshmen, they'll flash and then fade, then flash, then fade. From what I'm told about Blake is he was pretty steady. The only thing that faded late in spring was his conditioning, just because it's his first time really going through it. He got a little tired. But his execution and his level of play and his focus, from what I'm told, was pretty high throughout the spring.
Well, and he is a guy that, not only would his focus and his concentration and his pickup of the offense need to be high, but from a physical standpoint, I mean, we weren't there. We couldn't. We heard things. We knew kind of how big he was. Things of that nature. But then when we started hearing guys like Ryan Harris talk about what he saw,
yes, and that's the thing is what he saw.
Yeah,
right?
They were seeing it.
We weren't there. We don't know. We can't see it. So we had to rely on people that did see it.
And when he comes in and we hear, okay, he's what, 6'5", 330 or whatever the measure, 6'6". Okay, yeah, big boy, right? But there's 6'6", 330, and then there's 6'6", 330. I mean, is it baby fat? Is it, you know what I mean? Like,
is he big fat pudgy kid, or has he got a good body? And Quentin Nelson was 340. There's other guys that weigh 340 who were fat guy couldn't move. Quentin Nelson's just huge. Blake Fisher is just big.
Yes.
He's not like a fat kid. He's just big.
Exactly. Just a big dude.
Broad shoulders, big hands, big head, big. I mean, he's just big.
Right.
You know, but he's a good big. Like he doesn't look like a freshman.
And
that's
my
the other
point.
thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's my point.
Yeah.
Does he look like he's ready to start at a high Division I, football at left tackle? I mean, that's the question, right? Doesn't matter how what your recruiting profile looks like, are you ready? Because normally, maybe 2 years down the line, you're ready to start at left tackle.
Or at least, like Quentin Nelson, hey, even Quentin Nelson redshirted as a freshman.
Exactly.
I mean, that's where I come from. You don't see freshmen. And Robert Hainsey started as a freshman, but he was more of a rotation guy. Didn't take over till the last 4 games of the year as the starter. But even then, was still a rotation. I mean, you're saying, okay, Blake, you're the guy,
right? And you're the guy in the
tackle.
Spring. Like he made that jump in the spring. There's nobody as we sit here in July, nobody's saying, well, there's going to be a battle at left tackle, whatever. No, he solidified that in the spring. So
like a week into
tells me, yeah, exactly. Yes.
Which is a little concerning. I mean, he's good, but it also shows that, a guy like maybe Tosh Baker wasn't quite as ready as we'd hoped, even though he had a great winter from everything we were told. But, but here at the end of the day, Vince, he's going to have an impact on this football team this year. It's just, is it going to be a good impact or is it going to be a shaky impact? Because, again, you've got a quarterback who is a little prone to holding the ball a little bit long at times, not often, but at times.
True.
And then a true freshman at left tackle, that's a recipe for disaster because potentially could be with most freshmen. Now, the important thing for Blake Fisher is he's going to have to do something that's hard for freshmen to do, which is be consistent. That's going to be the key. Can you be consistent? He doesn't need to be dominant freshman. He needs to be consistent. I think it's more likely that we can predict dominance from him at times than consistency at times, just because of his youth.
That's fair.
But the point that Ryan Harris made, which is a good point, and again, he would know better than us, is he said, but when you look at a kid that's 6'6" with that kind of length and that kind of width, he can make mistakes that normal people could make. He can overcome mistakes that normal people can't overcome. If he's a second late out of his stance, if he overstrides because of his size and his powerful hands and his length, he can overcome that and rectify that mistake. Whereas if it happened to Liam Eichenberg as a redshirt sophomore and he's a first-year starter because he wasn't quite as wide, he didn't have the length. Liam had shorter arms. That might result in him getting beat. Where Blake is so long that he can overcome that. And we saw this a little bit from Josh Lugg in 2019. Josh Lugg would make a mistake at right tackle when he took over for Hainsey. He'd be laid out of his stance or maybe underset a little bit, but he was so long that he could then recover and at least ride the guy outside. And so at least Blake brings that to the table. And that was a point that Ryan Harris made that I thought was a really good point that, because of that size, he's going to be able to overcome some of those mistakes, which is going to help him at the end of the day be more consistent, even though technically if I'm coaching him up and grading his film, I'll say, hey, that's a bad pass set. You got to get out there sooner. You took too wide of an angle or you took too narrow of an angle or whatever the case. But, you got it done, but we need you to execute a little bit better. But to the quarterback, it's like, well, I don't really care about that. Did I have a pocket or not? You can clean up all that other technical stuff, but did I have a pocket or not? And that's going to ultimately, at the end of the day, going to be the key for Blake Fisher. Well, and then he's not, he's not the only guy.
Well, and speaking of not being the only guy, the other question mark for me, who's going to start next to him? And maybe I'm putting too much emphasis on that, as to who's going to be that guy next to Blake Fisher. But it really worries me when people are saying there's going to be an all freshman left side of the line. That makes me nervous. And it's nothing against Rocco Spindler. It's nothing against Blake Fisher. It's just the fact that they're both freshmen. And I personally would feel more comfortable if there was a more veteran presence there at left guard, whether that's going to be Kane Madden, whether that's going to be apparently Zeke Carell has an opportunity there. Depending on who that's going to be, I would prefer having somebody that has a little bit of experience, somebody that Blake Fisher can lean on mentally. When things are tough, when he's got a question, when he's not sure of what to do, things of that nature. Like I'm not, and I also will say that I want to know whoever's going to be that left guard sooner than later. You know what I mean? So that those two can practice together a lot. And
even if it's Rocco Spindler.
Even if it's Rocco Spindler.
Who
yes.
is the other freshman newcomer who could play. I think in a perfect world, Rocco doesn't start this year.
I agree.
I would love to see Rocco play.
Yes.
Yes. Even if it's not like it was in 2017 with Hainsey and Kramer, because that's not always like we always have this thing where we say, well, just rotate those guys. That worked in 2017 because of those unique players and because you had experience inside of them. You had Alex Barr as a right guard who could help them come along. That's a little harder to do if you have not necessarily as experienced of a group as they had in 2017. Because in 2017 you had 4 returning starters. So it was a little different animal than 2018 when you had a lot of guys in new places. And this year is going to be similar. You have some guys that have experience, but there's really only one true returning starter in the Notre Dame offense. Even Cain Madden, who started 2.5 years at Marshall. It's a Marshall. It's not a Notre Dame. It's different offense, different terminology, different timing, different techniques, all that kind of stuff. So that's going to be the question. So, like you said, it's not just so easy to say, just rotate them. Yeah. That has to work, and it may not be in every other down. It may be where Rocco gets every third series. But whatever the rotation needs to be, it needs to be a consistent rotation if they're going to use it. They may not, but then do you have Rocco rotate with Cain Madden? Do you have him rotate with who the other guard is? That's going to be the question. But I expect Rocco to play this year. I do. I hope Rocco plays this year. The reality is, Rocco Spindler's not a 5-year player unless he gets hurt at some point in time. He's just not.
Right.
So there's no reason to redshirt him or not play him. It's just, okay, is he going to be more of a rotation guy? Is he going to be a guy that you get in? Maybe he's a guy that you get in for a couple series in some of those blowout games where, you don't pull the whole starters, then put him in, but maybe you put him in for a couple series with the first team offensive line just to let him get some work there. There's all types of different things you could do beyond rotation, but I would like to see potentially him earn that rotation spot, Vince. So at the very least, that he's proven himself, and then next year he's going to be in line to step right into that Cain Madden spot, assuming Cain Madden starts this year, which, as I said earlier, they're expecting him to start, but he's going to have to win that job. If somebody beats him out, then they're going to be able to beat him out. I mean, they're going to be allowed to beat him out is what I'm trying to say, which isn't always the case.
Yeah, you're right. It's not always the case. And you figure, he came here as a graduate transfer. He was promised a starting position. I'm very happy to hear. And it's similar to the Jack Coan conversation. I'm happy to hear that there's going to be a competition. Now, if I'm a betting man, am I putting my money on Jack Coan and am I putting my money on Cain Madden to start? Yeah, I am. But at the same time, I'm glad to hear that there's a competition.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that makes me feel better.
Yeah, me too. Me too.
So the next set of newcomers, we're going to move outside and we're going to talk wide receiver, Brian. And there's a couple of incoming freshmen that are intriguing and have the talent to play. And you and I have had many conversations about freshmen playing wide receiver at Notre Dame, but we are cautiously optimistic. How does that sound? That these two might get an opportunity? Why don't you go ahead and kick this thing off?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's Lorenzo Styles and Deion Colzies who we're talking about, and I expect them to play this year, one way or the other. Whether they earn part of a rotation and Notre Dame does what they need to do, and they go 5-6 deep at receiver, and those guys get into the rotation at some point in time. Or it's just there's going to be some injuries, which injuries happen, right? And I think they're in a situation where the depth chart's fine right now. If they have injuries, they're going to have to play the freshmen, which I'm okay with because I've coached receiver. I get this. It's other than running back, it's the easiest position to get a young player ready to go. If you have a good system and you don't ask them to say, hey, you need to know the whole route tree, right? You got to be smart about it. But any good coach can get a talented freshman like Lorenzo Styles or Deion Colzies. I mean, you were talking about Lorenzo Styles, right? I just tweeted something out today. Kid's never played a game of Notre Dame. He's only been in the spring. He's already an ACC all-academic honor roll kid. His first semester at Notre Dame. You talk about handling your business, right? So the reason I say that is because Lorenzo's already shown that he can make a quick adaptation. And usually the kids can adapt quicker to football than they can the classroom. Well, for Lorenzo, that was a different deal. I think from what I saw, he was the only early enrollee to make that list. Again, because it ain't easy. Because at Notre Dame, you don't have a year and a half of taking, English 101, gym,
Hey, nothing wrong with gym class.
I'm just saying, at Notre Dame, you're not taking that your first semester.
I don't
You're
even think they
taking
have PE class at Notre Dame anymore, by the way.
I have no idea.
Just throwing that out there.
But the point is, he made that quick adaptation. He's a smart kid, and from what I'm told, he picked up the offense relatively well too. So I expect Lorenzo to actually play this year quite a bit. The question for me is more of how much, how are you going to use him for, and then obviously we'll get to Deion Colsey, but sticking with Lorenzo. Lorenzo's not really, at least I didn't see it in high school, necessarily an after the catch kind of guy per se. Like, he could do things out of the backfield, but he never showed the ability to like make a bunch of people miss at receiver. At times, what I think first and foremost he brings to the table is speed. I think that if Braden Lindsey goes down, I could see Lorenzo stepping into that role, no problem. Or if Braden Lindsey struggles, I could see Lorenzo stepping into that role. And then the other part of this is you have a couple guys in Lorenzo Styles and Xavier Watts that you can use effectively as part of rotation to then do what we've always said, which is take the pressure off of Braden Lindsey from a volume standpoint, even if Braden Lindsey is playing well. The problem with that, which we've talked about in the past, now let's talk about the counter argument is, yes, you limit Braden Lindsey, but if he's playing, 35 snaps out of 70, well, what kind of production are you getting in those other 35 snaps? Well, that's where Lorenzo Styles and Xavier Watts step into the mix for me. And we'll focus on Lorenzo this week. We'll talk about Xavier in a week or two when we talk about the sophomores. But the nice thing about Lorenzo is he brings a similar attribute to Braden Lindsey. Because Braden Lindsey's not really an after-the-catch guy either. And if anything, I would argue that, and when I mean after the catch, I don't mean catch a reverse and use your speed to outrun people. That's not what I'm referring to. They both have that. I'm referring to, catch a crossing route, make a dude miss in space, make a cut on a screenplay, then get vertical. That's the question that we have. Can they really do that at a high level? Braden did it once against New Mexico, but that's against the backups of New Mexico. Can he do it against Alabama, Clemson? We don't know. But that's okay because they bring another dynamic ability. And the fact is I would argue that Lorenzo has shown me more in high school the ability to make people miss even than Braden Lindsey did. I think Lorenzo is also a guy that has a little bit more strength than Braden did as a freshman, has more size than Braden had as a freshman. He's going to be he was like 165 pounds.
I remember seeing him at fall camp. I was like, whew, he is tiny.
Yeah, skinny. Yeah. And Lorenzo's about 1.5 inches taller. Lorenzo's about 20 pounds bigger than what Braden was. So I think he's going to be more ready to physically play. And Braden was not an early enrollee either. So Lorenzo has, now going on a 7-month head start in the weight program. So I think Lorenzo's going to be ready to play. And the fact that he brings a similar skill set to Braden Lindsey is very important because if he can, if he's in my rotation, I've said, hey, early in the year, I want to see them just throw a bomb to Braden Lindsey. I almost would say, no, don't do that. Wait till Lorenzo gets his series and throw deep to him because you want to let teams know, like, we already know you got to worry about Braden Lindsey. You've seen him back in 2019, right? We're going to use him. But we've got this other kid that when he's on the field, and we're going to use him too because one of the tells that Notre Dame has had in recent years, and it's been this way for about 3-4 years, when the backup receivers were in the game, they were not throwing to him at all. I mean, they would rarely throw to those guys. And so you kind of get those tells. So if you come out early and Lorenzo's your backup at X, hypothetically, or Xavier Watts, whoever the case may be, but in this case, we'll focus on Lorenzo, take a shot on him early. It doesn't have to necessarily be Florida State. Maybe you could do it against Toledo or Purdue, but get him some shots early to let people know you can't change your defense when Lorenzo's in the game compared to when Braden Lindsey's in the game. And that's going to be important if he can provide that, because I do think he brings, and he was good as a junior. I've graded him as like a top 150-ish caliber player as a junior. Really good pickup. His game went to another level because the one thing I said about him as a junior was I felt like there was another gear speed-wise that he needed to get to, and he could get to. Well, as a senior, we saw that. We saw that gear. And now he's got some of the awkwardness out of him, trying to learn a new system in the spring bench. Now he gets to focus on, okay, I laid the foundation in the spring. I'm going to play it in the fall. And I think it's going to be important for two ways. The first one is what I just talked about. He can complement Braden Lindsey. Braden comes in, out. You still have a similar skill set. The other part of this is, hey, Braden, you better start doing something because this kid this kid wants to play, and this kid's pretty good, and this kid brings a similar skill set. And Xavier Watts is doing the same thing. And that's the other area where freshmen can make an impact is even if they don't necessarily make a direct impact, if they play well in camp and if they push the starters, then now all of a sudden the impact of the starters, because they're looking over their shoulder saying, hey, if I don't bring it today on Tuesday, then just put Lorenzo Styles on the field. That's where you can start to get in some trouble and say, hey, you got passed up. You thought you had a spot locked up. You went out and kind of went through the motions, and this kid was grinding every day, and he's a baller. He's every bit as good as you are. You're just older. That to me is where you really can get the best out of your whole depth chart. And that's where I think Lorenzo can really have an impact is not just his personal production, but then if Xavier Watts wants to play, Xavier better bring it. Avery Davis better bring it. Lawrence Keys better bring it. Braden Lindsey better bring it because Lorenzo can play slot and outside. And so it's a deal. Hey, if you guys want to stay on the field, you better bring it because Lorenzo's going to be working to beat you out. And that's part of my excitement about them, assuming that they're given the chance to do that. And
big assumption.
I believe that Lorenzo will, based on some of the things I'm hearing.
Yeah, no, and you mentioned, the fact that he's got a similar skill set to Braden Lindsey, and we've talked about the fact that Braden Lindsey, he can't be out there every play of the game like that. That's just not who he is, right? So there's going to need to be, whether it's formationally, whether it's somebody just playing the field position, whatever the case may be. He's not going to be out there every snap. So
and by formationally, what Vince is referring to is they go 12 personnel, and there's an extra tight end, and that's who replaces Braden Lindsey. So maybe it's still Avery Davis and Kevin Austin, or Avery Davis and whoever the W is. That's that, or Lawrence Keys. That's what he's referring to by formationally.
Yes, sir.
Oh, and then there's Deion Colzie.
Yes, that's correct.
This is the big enigma for me.
Because he didn't come in early, right? He's coming in. He's there now, obviously, but fall practice will be his first practice.
So he missed out a lot of that learning the offense period, which this staff values so much.
Correct.
And he to me is going to be the test case of just where this offensive staff has come from. If they look at it and say, hey, this kid's just too good not to play, and so let's figure it out, then that's going to be the first big test. Because I think Deion's going to work. I don't think that's going to be an issue. But Deion's young. I mean, I've said this before. He's a year younger than most kids in his grade.
Okay.
And so he is a younger football player. He didn't play against very good competition in high school. Athens Academy was more of an academic place than it was a place to go play the best football, which would explain a big reason why Deion Colzie is at Notre Dame, right? It's that student athlete part of it.
Sure.
But he's a very talented kid too. I mean, he's 6'4", he's over 200 pounds. He's got long speed. He's got a lot of talent. It's just he's not going to know the entire offense right away because no freshman learns that right away when they show up in the summer, right?
And we know that's an issue.
Right. And so this is the deal where you say, hey, look, if I'm Brian Kelly, I'm sitting down with Deion, I'm saying, hey, you need to do everything you need to put into work. We're expecting you to play this year. It's up to you to earn it. And right, I'm saying that to him. Then I'm walking over into the receiver coach's office. I'm saying, hey, if you don't get Deion Colzie ready to play this year for us, we're gonna have a conversation at the end of the year that you're not gonna like.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, that's what head coaches are supposed to do.
Sure.
If you can't get these two kids, and if you can't get Lorenzo, this is my come to Jesus conversation with Dell Alexander. Okay, I'm going up to Xavier Watts. I'm going up to Lorenzo. I'm going up to Deion. Individually, I'm saying, hey, look, you guys better earn playing time this year. We need you. So you better, every single day, you better put in whatever work you need to do in the film room, in the weight room, in the training room, on the practice field, all that, to earn playing time. It's up to you to earn that playing time. That's what I'm saying to the players. Then I'm walking down to Coach Alexander's office. I'm saying, see these three kids right here? If they're not ready to play this year, you and I are going to have a very uncomfortable conversation following the end of the season. So it's either get them ready or get your resume ready. One of those two things needs to happen. And I know
you're being serious. I'm not laughing.
I am. Yeah, I mean,
I know you're being serious.
You know what that conversation is like.
Yeah, man, absolutely. Look, being a coach, it's a results-oriented business.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, whether it's wins and losses for the team as the head coach, whether it's not developing your player, whatever the case may be. And the fact that Brian Kelly, we feel, has turned over kind of this new leaf of not wanting to get beat in the big games anymore, he's going to have to be self-reflective on what the staff looks like and what they're doing, right? And so we can only hope that these conversations are taking place. I mean, they have to happen. They have to happen. And we're not saying that Dell Alexander can't do it. We're not saying that at all. So
I think he can.
Yeah.
I just think he needs that kick in the butt. I think Coach Alexander doesn't handle – Brian Kelly's a hard coach on his coaches. He gets on his coaches in practice. And I don't think Coach Alexander handles that real well. I think he's kind of, it's all younger. He's afraid to make a mistake. So I'd rather just put the veteran out there who's not going to make a mistake, right? Because I don't get my butt chewed out. He's got to get over that.
Yeah, I get that.
If the coach gets on you, he gets on you.
Yeah.
Right. And then you use that to then go motivate your players. Hey, I'm getting sick of getting yelled at. So, hey,
it's downhill,
you
baby.
Figure out what you need to do, or I'm going to put in guys that know what to do. Right.
Yeah.
But then you got to do the things to make sure you're coaching them up to get to that point. You don't just throw out veiled threats. You got to, you're the coach. You get paid 6 figures to coach them up. Go flip and coach them up.
Exactly.
And that's what you do. But I've had coaches like that. That say, look, I'm not going to yell at the players. I'm not going to yell at a single player unless they do something stupid, cheap or something. I'm going to yell out. If your players are screwing up, I'm not going to yell at them. I'm coming at you.
Mm-hmm.
So, hey, better get them ready. And I don't think coaches handle that real well. And I think he needs to kind of get over that. And if he does, I think he'll do fine, because I think Del Alexander's a very smart coach. I think he's a very good football coach. I think there's a reason Chip Long trusted him to the point where he had to have him here at Notre Dame. It's just he's got to kind of get out of his own way. But that's what Brian Kelly needs to do, in my opinion. He needs to sit down and have that conversation with him, because those 3 kids and the 2 freshmen that we're focusing on in this show, they're just too good not to play.
Right.
There's no excuse this year about we don't have the talent or all these other kind of things. Oh, we don't have enough experience. Hey, Clemson beat you in the playoff a couple of years ago with a freshman and a couple sophomores. You know what I mean? At receiver, right? Yeah, they had Hunter Renfro. Well, Notre Dame has Avery Davis, right? So, there's no excuses this year at receiver. None.
Agreed.
You've got you could lose 2 guys and still have really good football players, but you've got to be able to get the freshmen ready to play. And Dion brings something to your roster that nobody else really has other than Kevin Austin, and Dion brings it in a 2 inches taller version.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, is he does bring that size, and you're going to need that. Now, maybe you don't need that the way that you have in the past, but you're going to need that at times. And especially if Kevin is slow to be healthy, or if he gets hurt again, then you're going to really have to do that. Because if you just think you're going to throw Joe Wilkins out there and just say, well, that's it, then you're limiting yourself.
Right.
You need to have Deion Colsey ready to at least play 5 to 8 snaps a game. And then as early in the season, to me, Lorenzo, Xavier Watts, and Deion Colsey are 3 young guys you got to have at least 8 to 10 snaps a game early in the season. And then how they perform in those 8 to 10 snaps. And then, of course, hopefully they get a few more at the – and when I say 8 to 10, I'm not talking about 8 to 10 at the end of the game of the Toledo game. I'm talking about 8 to 10 during the course of a normal game. And then if you're blowing out Toledo, if you're blowing out Purdue or Florida State, then you can get them even more reps.
Right.
And if they handle those reps well, then you play them more. If they don't, then you kind of keep them in that zone, because at least that way they're ready to play should their number be called because of injury or something like that. So that's what they need to do, it, because Deion Colsey is too big, too athletic, and too talented to sit on the bench the way the vast majority of. Do you know how Del Alexander's been at Notre Dame now for 4 years, 17, 18, 19, 20, right? 4 years. Do you know how many combined catches his true freshmen have during that period of time? 9. You had Kevin Austin had 5 in 2018.
Yeah.
Michael Young had 4 in 2017.
So
they have not had a true freshman catch a pass in the last 2 years.
Yeah. That's a problem. And Deion Colsey, I think, is even more of an important, and I'm not saying anything against Lorenzo Styles, just because of the position that they're playing in that field position, or in that boundary position. The injury concerns with Kevin Austin and then Joe Wilkins being the next guy. Look, and we've talked, Joe Wilkins is a good player, but he's not a starting caliber player. And if he is starting, he's going to need somebody else behind him who's going to be getting reps. Like he's not going to be an every down guy. He's not, any of the other guys that have played the boundary who are now in the NFL. He's not those guys. He's just not. And so they need to have guys behind Joe Wilkins ready to go. And Deion Colsey is a perfect opportunity to be that guy.
I honestly would like to see Deion. Yeah. I'd like to see Deion kind of end up being that number 2 if Kevin Austin's healthy.
Agreed. I get that too.
I just don't think Joe Wilkins is a boundary. I think if you put Joe Wilkins in the boundary, you're now hurting Joe Wilkins, because I just don't think that's his game.
Sure.
And we saw that in the spring. He made that nice catch on Cam Hart, but he was very well covered. There was a couple snaps where Ryan Barnes just rode him out of bounds. he's not a boundary receiver.
Yeah.
You're playing him there out of necessity.
Sure.
And then now that you're not putting Joe Wilkins in position to be as successful as he can be.
Sure.
he's a guy that needs space. He needs to be able to work zones and things like that. And that's why I think the X position is really ideally where he needs to play. But you're going to have to play him there because he's the only other guy with Kevin Austin that has any size if you're not willing to get Deion Colzie ready. But so that's, again, what I talked about earlier with Lorenzo Styles, that's another area where Deion Colzie can impact the roster just beyond just his own production is if he can give you enough confidence to be that number 2 guy that you can play Joe to the field more, again, that makes your whole depth chart better. And those things are all part of the process.
So, Brian, let's talk about another pass catcher or potential pass catcher that is a newcomer as well, and that's at the tight end position. We all know Michael Mayer. He's not a newcomer. He has announced his presence with authority, as you said.
Except to Pro Football Focus.
Well, I mean, you can't be perfect. And so, but there is a freshman who would be considered a newcomer who has every opportunity to work his way up the depth chart. And frankly, if they use tight ends the way they've been using them, I mean, even if he's the 3rd string tight end, he's going to be getting playing time, and he's going to affect what this offense is doing. That's Coan Barong.
Yeah, Kane's an interesting kid, Vince, because he's in a situation where being an early enrollee, he got a chance to get in the weight room. When he showed up, they actually asked him to lose weight because he had kind of pumped up the 2. I mean, he was good. I mean, he pumped up the 240, put in a lot of work, and they say, "Look, let's slow me down." That's kind of the MO for Coach Bayless is we're going to build you up. Don't you worry about that.
We need you to come in as a blank slate,
and partly because of the role they want him to play. They want him to kind of early on play that Tommy Tremble type of role, that fullback, that wing back, that guy that can move around, use his athleticism because. Kane's an interesting player because he's not a real big guy. At least he wasn't in high school. Again, he's put on some good weight. He's about 6'4". And when he first got to Notre Dame or committed to Notre Dame, he was like 215 pounds. I'm like, well, this kid's going to be like a stretch the field. And then you watch playing like physical blocker, you know? And so he brings some of that Tommy Tremble traits, but I would argue he's probably a little thicker than Tommy, especially as a freshman. He's taller than Tommy. And so now it's like, okay, well, if you want to fill that role that Tommy Tremble brought, he's going to have a chance to do that. I think Kevin Bauman will as well, but that's who I think Coan is going to battle. But I think the way he played, and we could bring Mitchell Evans in this conversation too, but I think Coan Barong is the better option because I think he can play that fullback role. And so I think that's an area where we could see him playing early on. And then from that, because he does have speed, you can do some interesting things with him, wheel routes, under routes, slide routes. They used to run this tight end screen back in the day. Vince, remember they would bootleg and they'd bring the tight end underneath. And so the receivers would actually be blocking downfield. Then they'd throw that little dump off to the tight end on a bootleg and they'd be blocking downfield. The receivers and backs would be blocking downfield for him. So, I mean, I could see him being a guy like that because I think he's a guy that can stretch the field in certain ways. And so I think Coan Barong's another kid who, if he can have a good fall camp, is going to have a chance to make an impact this year because he's another guy that I don't know if I see him as a 5-year player. If he's as good as we think he's going to be. I don't know if he's a 5-year guy.
So
not saying not saying he's a Michael Mayer going to leave in 3 years kind of guy, but I think he's more of a 4-year guy. And then you also protect him if he does get hurt. You can then have a medical instead of just losing a year. Because the way it works is a medical, you only get that 5th year from a medical or that additional year from a medical if it's, you have to have so you can't redshirt as a freshman. And then you get like an additional year because you got hurt. You've already used your red shirt, right? Like it's a convoluted rule. It's kind of stupid if you ask me, but it's an NCAA rule. But whatever. So to me, he's just more of a 4-year player, and but then that's referring to kind of 6th year is what I'm referring to. The 5th year basically is if you have a red shirt as a freshman and then you have a medical, you just lose a year. You don't play. You don't get that red shirt back. And so that's kind of where I come from with that. He's a guy that to me I look at and I say, man, this kid that has a chance to be a really key part of this rotation this year because he brings a different skill set than Michael Mayer and George Takis. That's the other part to this.
I would love to see him in that fullback spot and, them do some things with him from that fullback spot, have him get into the flat from the fullback position, not just, okay, he's in the fullback spot, he's blocking. You know what I mean? Like you can use him in the pass game, even though you bring him in as the fullback. And we never really saw that in the past right? When they would bring in the fullback, it would just he's the lead blocker and that's it.
Right.
So I think there's some things that you can do with the fullback in the passing game, and I think he would fit that mold very, very well.
And Truman hit us up with another super sticker, so I appreciate that again very, very much. Bringing the heat today.
Yeah, no kidding.
Absolutely love it. Absolutely love it.
Awesome.
Well, and then Vince, there's one final piece to this freshman puzzle, and we won't talk a lot about it because I'm not sure which one's going to step up, but I do believe one of the freshmen is going to play at running back this year.
Yeah. Yes.
And, it could be Audric Estime. He could be a short yardage goal line back. It could be Logan Diggs as a guy that can pass block, pass catch. I mean, they both bring interesting skill sets to the table. I think Audric could be more of a power runner early on. Logan could be more of a dual threat kind of guy. But I'll say this. I think one of them's going to play. We'll find out which one it's going to be. But they're in a situation where if somebody gets hurt, these two freshmen are going to be invaluable because they're both physically ready to play right away. And that's an important. I mean, Audric Estime's huge. My concern is he's put on too much weight. You know what I mean? Is he too muscular? That is an actual thing at running back.
Because you get stiffer, right?
Yeah,
I mean, that's your
right.
That's
and
your
you get
issue.
heavier. It takes some. I mean, if you're 20 pounds bigger than you should be, you're not gonna be as fast as you should be.
Which makes sense,
right? And so like as I said, not everybody can carry weight the same way.
Yeah.
So now we're gonna find out if he can.
Well, and it's going to be interesting because they've got 3 established guys in the running back room already, and we have rarely seen them go beyond that 3 from a rep standpoint. But if there's an injury potentially, or if there's a possibility. Look, Sebo Flemister is a very, very good back, and I think he gets overlooked a little bit because of Kyron Williams and Chris Tyree, and maybe rightfully so. I'm not going to make that judgment, but at the same time, he's a very good back, and it's going to take a lot for one of these freshmen to come in and unseat him from that third running back role, I think. And so I guess if there's no injuries,
of it. I think they're capable of it because I think they bring a little bit more of an all-around game than Sebo brings.
Okay,
especially when you look at Logan Diggs, and that's where Sebo needs to watch out. And again, I like Sebo, and I think Sebo can play. And if I'm not one of those people who just thinks they're automatically going to beat him out. I'm just simply saying, look, this is where a football team's supposed to be, Vince. This is where a championship team is supposed to be. Where if you're first, second, or third string guy, your job is not secure because of the talent where you're bringing in from a recruiting standpoint. I also don't believe you just hand jobs over to young guys either. They got to earn them, but they got to be given the opportunity to earn them. But if a young player's a better playmaker than an older guy, then you got to get that younger guy on the field. And so it's one of those things where you say, hey, look, do I miss practice today? Do I tape my ankle up and miss practice today or in practice, or do I maybe take a day off?
And just sit on the bike.
Well, you kind of get over there and say, I'm probably out a couple of days. And then you watch practice. And, as you're on the bike riding around, you're watching Logan Diggs or Audric Estime or both of them just going out there and making plays. You're like, you know what? My ankle's feeling a whole lot better today, coach. I think I'm ready to go tomorrow. I mean, I just think those things help your football team.
No question.
And to me, that's what's exciting about that group. Now, again, I don't know which one's going to play, and I don't think either one's going to necessarily play a primary role.
Right.
It could be just short yardage, goal line, third back kind of thing. But I do think you need a third back.
Yes.
And the thing I think, the reason I kind of lean towards Logan Diggs, even though Audric Estime is sort of the getting a lot of the love because of what he looks like in shorts and the shirt.
Yeah,
I get that. I graded out Audric as a 4-star player too, but I think Logan Diggs reminds me a lot of that Tony Jones role from 2017. He can run the ball, he can catch, he can pass block, he can kind of do a little bit of everything. And I think there's certainly a need for that because if there are times you can take some of that third down punishment off of Kyron Williams' shoulders, then why not do it? If you're just going to have Kyron Williams sitting in the backfield on 3rd and 8 pass blocking, why don't you just put somebody else in the game?
Sure, give the other guy a blow because he's going to be doing other things.
Right. I'm not saying do it all the time, but that's just another way to somewhat limit the wear and tear on Kyron Williams because you got to keep him healthy all year. I mean, that's an important thing. So I'm looking forward to seeing these backs. I really am. Now, again, I don't think they're going to play a ton. I don't think Notre Dame needs to play them the way that they need to play the receivers. But I would kind of, sleep with one eye open during fall camp when it came to Logan Diggs and Audric Estime.
No horse heads in the bed, does
Audric Estime strike you as a guy that's looking to kind of come and sit for a year?
Not to me.
Does Logan Diggs strike you as the kind of guy that's I'm perfectly fine sitting on the bench for a year?
They're going to push, and I
he
like
didn't
that.
come all the way up here from Louisiana to wait his time. Now, it doesn't mean that they're not going to do it if they get. I mean, if other guys are better, it doesn't mean. But their point is they're coming up here to push,
right?
And that's the important piece.
It's exciting. It's exciting. I mean, we've named off 6 freshmen who we believe should get playing time. I mean, I can't remember the last time that may have been the case.
Well, earn it. Yeah.
You know what I mean? I mean, just 6 guys that we think have a great opportunity to
on offense
help this team
on one
on
side
offense.
of the ball.
Yeah, on one side of the ball. So it's exciting. And when you add in the 2 guys that transferred over, there's a chance for this offense to be explosive, to be exciting, and it's going to be interesting to see how they put all the pieces together. Let's just put it that way.
Mm-hmm.
So that is going to do it for the first portion of our podcast today, the offensive newcomers. Make sure you tune in tomorrow because we will have the defensive newcomer show tomorrow. Is that accurate, Brian? I believe that's
what we're doing. Defensive so we're going to have Q&A coming right after this.
Of course.
So YouTube people don't go anywhere. Okay. But tomorrow we're going to talk about defensive newcomers, and then Thursday we're going to talk about Toledo and Purdue. And then Friday, Vince.
We all know what Friday is, buddy boy.
And we may have a second show on Thursday, but that's to be determined.
Yeah, maybe. We don't. So that's going to do it for this edition of the Irish Breakdown. For Brian, I'm Vince, and we will talk to you next time on the Irish Breakdown podcast.
Now let's get some questions, Vince.
Yes, let's jump right on in. Of course, we have an abundance of questions that came in before we even hit record.
Yeah,
Brian, which I know that you're not surprised about. Brent has the honors of the first. Yep. Did you have something?
Nope. I was just going to let you know I'm way down. I'm like 130.
I'm up at the top at the moment. We'll see how long that lasts.
Let's get through these. Let's get some of these in. Yep.
So Brent says, I just wanted to get here and say Marcus Freeman. That's all. Good day, gentlemen. I like it.
Not at all relevant to the topic today, but that's what Marcus Freeman is doing. I mean, that's what people are excited about. No question.
That's exactly right. Kevin Thomas says Jalen Snead apparently committed July 12th as ND is in search of their 12th national championship.
That's what his coach said. And that Jalen said. That's really awesome.
That's really thinking outside the box a little bit. I kind of dig that.
One of the I think it was one of the recruits then said, no, we going for 13, meaning we're going to win a couple of these bad boys. and that's relevant. I mean, it's all fun and games, but it's relevant because that's what Notre Dame is selling to these recruits. We're trying to win a championship here.
That's what
the recruits are buying it because they've been in the playoff the last 3 years. You're the next piece to us getting over that hump.
Yes, exactly. And that's the message that should be being sent. No question. Andy Roke, what's up, IB family? I just saw that Luke Montgomery will be visiting for the July 27th barbecue. Do you think he may be on commit watch? Pair him with Vernon and Kelly. Wow, 23 could be special.
I'm not putting any 2023 kids on commit watch just because it's so early. But here's what I've been told about Luke Montgomery. So Notre Dame likes Luke Montgomery a lot as a defensive lineman. They like him as a end tackle kind of guy, and then big guy. The problem is a lot of other schools are convincing Luke that he's an offensive lineman. Right now, from what I understand, he likes Notre Dame a lot, but it's determining whether he wants to be an O-line or D-line. He's thinking about going into next year and seeing how he does an offensive line and then seeing how it looks, whereas Notre Dame's trying to convince him, no, you're a defensive lineman. If Notre Dame's able to convince him of that, then yes, he could be on commit watch. Absolutely could be on commit watch. But I hesitate to really put anybody on commit watch. But yeah, he's an interesting player, very intriguing player. I personally like him better at defensive line. I think to get to the size he'd need to get to play offensive line, he would start losing some of his athleticism. That's my concern with putting him on the offensive line. I think keep him between 275 to 290 as a D lineman. That's to me, that's going to be his sweet spot.
Kevin Thomas says some of the names that are also visiting Drake Bowen, Derek LeBlanc, Tamir Robinson, Aiden Schuler, and then from the 24 class, Anthony Specca. Opinions on these players? I
mean, we'll get into 2023 stuff later. I did write a little bit about Drake Bowen and Tamir Robinson today in the What's Next article, but that's referring to the barbecue that Notre Dame is going to have on the 27th.
Correct. And Corey D wants to know if Sonny Styles is going to be at the barbecue. If
no
you
idea.
Heard any of that? Okie dokie.
Struggling to find questions, huh?
Yeah. Well, it's a lot of talk about the visits and all the fun stuff of that nature. Tommy Gunn says the season is approaching faster than it seems. And let me tell you,
they're going to report for camp in less than a month.
Those are facts right there, because Brian and I had all these plans and all these different shows we were going to do. And it's just like we only got a couple of weeks left before the season is going to start.
Recruiting just completely wiped out this summer. I mean, it's been so busy.
And June, I mean, this is a June like no other. I mean, It's just there's and David says as of the start of the show, there are 54 days and 6.5 hours until kickoff. So.
Kickoff. I mean, that's what I'm saying. Like, start of fall camp is less than a month away. I mean, it's like 3.5 weeks, 3.5 weeks away. It's insane.
And of course, I just got bumped down, which is awesome. Here we go. Sean Rogers says, I think Colsey could be a breakout wide receiver. Blake is going to be all world. I can see 2 to 3 freshmen making an impact on special teams. Hope Rocco makes a big splash too.
Yeah, I think a lot of the special teams freshmen are going to be on the defensive side. So we'll definitely be talking about a lot of those kind of guys tomorrow. For sure. But I hope Dion can be a breakout receiver. I think both him and Lorenzo could. I think we could see a lot of the young guys playing well. And look, if the veterans don't step up and play better than they have in recent seasons, I think you almost force those guys on the field, just at the very least, just to kind of be a threat. Because I think what can happen, Vince, is because you didn't play these guys when they were freshmen, right? Maybe they think, well, they're not going to play those freshmen. They didn't play me when I was a freshman. They're not going to play those guys. Maybe you can get a little bit complacent. And hopefully that they can break that thought of, I'm trying to think of the right way to say it, but hopefully you can end that sort of part of your program where that is no longer something that people think about. Don't play freshman receivers.
Matt D says, hopefully the O-line play of the last couple of years wasn't only because of Chris Watt. Chris Watt was only there 1 year.
Yeah, but the O-line play in 2019 wasn't very good. It was probably the worst year in the last 5 years of O-line play. Yeah, Chris Watt was only there in 2020.
He was only there in 2020, and we saw a difference in 2020 for sure.
Yeah, which is weird because the O-line, to me, played worse in 2019 than they did in 2018.
Yeah.
I thought the unit took a step back, and that was problematic. And then, of course, last year they took a big step forward. So that's where some of the mystery about this line is going to be.
Ron says when they run to the right, they'll need to pull the left guard. Not necessarily. I mean, it just depends on the scheme that you're running. Right. I mean, that's not necessarily a fact.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that to the point that Ron's saying, I think I don't know if you're going to be wanting to run a lot of counter stuff with Kane Madden. So if you are going to run counter, I think you're going to want to run counter more to your right than you will to your left. If he is your right guard, I don't, Vince, maybe you disagree, but I don't, yeah, you could do some kick out stuff, but I mean, it's going to take him a couple extra steps to get to that kick out block. So then all of a sudden that gives the defensive end more time to squeeze down, which then sets your edge not where you want it. So I get where he's coming from, but yeah, you're not going to run to the right and pull your left guard if you're like running pin and pull. You're going to have to be able to move him at some point in time. I would say, if anything, if you want to move your guard, you're going to have to move your left guard more than your right guard, but that doesn't necessarily mean running to the right. It could mean G scheme to the left. It could mean kickouts to the left. It could mean wrap blocks to the left, those kind of things.
Matt D says, big Blake Fisher. I think he will make mistakes at times, but he needs to play through them as long as it's not costing us games.
Yeah, and one mistake rarely costs anyone games. Yeah, there must be a lot to work through, Vince, because there's a lot of that air today. So
it's just a lot of comments, about the offensive line being better and things of that nature.
I'll pull one up while you're searching, Vince.
Thank you.
Truman says, is Mayer a baby Gronkowski? No, I think they're different players. Number one, he hates that name. He hates that expression. So
Thank goodness.
I won't be calling him that. But I think from a skill set standpoint, I think Mayer's more – Gronk was a unique player because he was kind of like hybrid tight end trapped in a big tight end's body. I think Mayer's more of a traditional tight end that can also move around. I don't know if Gronk would be the comparison that I would use. I think Michael's a unique player. I think he's got a little bit of Tyler Eifert to his game. I think he's got a little bit of Kyle Rudolph to his game. I think he could potentially have a little Troy Nicholas to his game. So he's a bit of a unique player, but I don't think Gronkowski is necessarily the role that I would use for him. Plus, I would hate to compare him to what Gronkowski was in college because he was hurt all the time, which is why he wasn't a first-round pick.
Ron says, if Patterson is the center, then who is the left guard? And his reasoning is because that position is going to pull a lot.
Yeah, Notre Dame doesn't necessarily pull a ton. They're more of a zone-oriented team, so they don't pull a ton. They'll count, on counters but a lot of times when they run counter, he's not necessarily pulling. He's kicking out. It's kind of a pull from a big picture standpoint, but it's more of a kick out. The guard will kick out, and then the tackle or the tight end will actually be the wrap guy. That's the more difficult one of those blocks. Left guard, it's going to be a battle. I think Zeke Correll is going to be in that conversation. I think I'm drawing a blank here, Vince. Rocco Spindler. Sorry, goodness gracious. I think Rocco will be in that conversation. Who knows? Does Quinn Carroll have a big offseason that they say they got to put him in the conversation? Is John Dirksen going to be in that conversation again? Because again, just because those guys maybe were right tackle in the spring, right and left tackle to a degree is somewhat interchangeable. The reason I'm hesitant to move Kane Madness because he's got so much more time there. I'd rather move a younger guy because at least you solidify that one. But maybe they put him at left guard and they say, hey, look, we're going to put our two big guys at left guard and we're going to be good there.
Matt Lass still riding high from Snead's commitment last night. And,
you're not alone. There's a lot of people feeling that.
That was a fun show to do last night. There is no question about that. Ron says it's time for Xavier to show his stuff.
Yeah.
I know I know you're on that boat.
Yeah.
Brian.
I'm looking forward to talking about that. Because somebody texted me today, said something about Tim Priester interviewed Tommy Reese, and he's talking about you and Xavier Watts. So I don't know if that's accurate or not. I didn't read it, but if that's true, there you go.
Brent's jumping in. He says Reese has been saying quite a bit about Watts. I think they'll make an effort to get him going this year.
Hope so. Again, talk is cheap. I need to see it, but I hope that's accurate. Hope that's accurate. Kid can play.
Chris Workman says if Lorenzo Styles doesn't get playing time as a freshman, I will lose my mind.
You're not alone, Chris. You're not alone. Yeah, a lot of dead air today. Apparently, there's way too many conversations going on.
There's a lot of talk about a particular quarterback recruit that's probably not coming to Notre Dame.
Who's that? Malachi Nelson?
No, Arch Manning.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, exactly.
Why are we talking about Arch Manning?
Exactly.
Are you guys not listening to me still?
So it's a lot of talk about that. It's hard to sift through everything.
I don't know how many times I can say it. Arch isn't coming to Notre Dame. Richard Robinson has a question while you sift through all the Arch Manning conversation.
Thank you.
How about Styles and Colsey breaking out? Very talented young receivers. Turn them loose, BK. I mean, look, I don't know if they'll be breakouts. I don't think this is the show for that. We're not saying they're going to be breakouts. It's just about I think they're going to be parts of the rotation.
Brent says ND has recruited wide receiver better than all, but probably Georgia and Bama in the SEC. LSU is arguable. I'll let you jump all over that.
I mean, first of all, the fact Ohio State's not in that list is kind of unless he's only talking about the SEC. But I mean, I don't think that I would agree with that. I think LSU's recruited better than Notre Dame at receiver. I think Georgia's receiving recruiting has been a little overrated. I think they bring in guys that are highly ranked, not necessarily great players. But if you're just talking about SEC, I could probably go with you there. But if you're talking just nationally, then there's schools that are missing. But if just SEC, I'd say Bama, and I think LSU's recruited better than Georgia has. I think a lot of Georgia's receivers, Georgia recruits a lot of highly ranked guys because I think they get rewards for that. I think sometimes they recruit a lot of highly ranked but overrated players that are more highly ranked for other reasons than they're just super talented.
Corey D, he says, I think Joe Wilkins is a nice player and a useful one, but I truly hope he isn't an every down guy. Yes, he should be part of the rotation, and we have several wide receivers who are more explosive. I think that's a really apt description of Joe Wilkins. He is a nice player, and he should be part of the rotation. But and you mentioned it during the pod. If he's starting at the at the boundary position, you're not putting him in the best opportunity to be successful. And I don't think he's a starter on this team. With the depth that's on this team, I just don't think that he's a starter.
I have a question out here, Vince, that I want to pull up.
Awesome.
Technical technician says, "Hey, Coach, I just wanted to watch the Irv Smith Sr. Zorch podcast. Who was the knucklehead recruiter who refused to offer Irv Smith Jr. a scholarship? Off topic, however, very curious." Look, so first of all, there was a reason that Irv Smith Jr. did not get an offer from Notre Dame. And it's not about any coach being a knucklehead. Irv Smith wasn't getting into Notre Dame. So simple as that. So, and honestly, he wasn't a big-time recruit. And I'm also not going to argue. I'm not going to criticize the Notre Dame coaching staff for, not bringing in him, because the reason that they didn't bring him in is because they already had commitments from Cole Kmet and Brock Wright, who are both better high school football players and better recruits. And honestly, I think Cole Kmet was a better college player as well. Hey, Vince, I'm going to have to bail from this because the guys are working on my deck. It's getting like obnoxiously loud now.
I can hear it.
But if you want to work through the rest of these questions,
I will attempt.
But I got to get a couple other things done. And before I go, I appreciate everybody that signed up. We had way more signups the first day on the message board than I expected. Appreciate everybody being a part of it. You're going to see the breakdown or the website address for the boards down there. boards.irishbreakdown.com. If you're a member of SI, shoot me an email. We'll figure out a way to get you over to the boards. If you're not a member, we have a monthly option and an annual option. It's cheaper than the SI membership, and I really appreciate everybody being a part of that. I dropped some O-line nuggets on the board today about a couple things, and so yeah. So I mean, there's some already some intel going on there. I got a couple other calls I've made today, and so some really good stuff. So I appreciate that. And there's a lot of questions that we're not gonna be able to get to today. I apologize about that. It's just I expected the work being done outside to not be nearly as loud today. And so Vince, you can't stay on to finish up the show.
A lot of the questions is about 23 recruiting quarterback and things of that nature, and so it's stuff that we'll cover at a later time for sure. It's not necessarily anything that you know what I mean. So that's the conversation.
So I apologize if you have some questions.
Head over to the message boards, baby.
Yeah, and look, this is not a ploy to get you the message board. We're getting our deck worked on. They were supposed to be done with this part by now.
Yes,
and they're not. So I apologize, but yeah, we'll be back at this tomorrow, and we'll try to get to those questions again. I apologize for not being able to stay around longer, but it just was going to get real distracting and unprofessional. So we're going to wrap up there. Appreciate everybody being part of the show today. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell so that you can hear, so you can get all the updates and different things that we're going to do. And we'll be back with it. We'll be back at it tomorrow. So we'll again, that's the nice thing about having the message boards now is there are still questions you can ask, and we'll get to those. But again, I apologize. But for Vince Sedera and Brian Driscoll, we will talk to you all again very, very soon.